Good evening. Shavua Tov. The topic that I am going to speak about this evening is a topic on which I wrote an article which was published 10 years ago. And although I have written many articles over the course of my life, because that's what people in university are supposed to do. Everybody has their work. My work is to write articles. It's no question that this article caused the most public interest, controversy, arguments, and at that time there was already internet, so hundreds of talkbacks in all directions. But actually I did not write the article in order to create controversy. I wrote the article in order to relate to a real life issue in Jewish life. At that time, there were articles that appeared in the Israeli newspapers interviewing young men and women who were shomer mitzvot and were students or young people just beginning their professional life, and they said that they have relationships with people of the other sex, and their friends have relationships with people of the other sex, and what exactly happens in those relationships, what they do, what they don't do, nobody talks about. And in fact, there's no point in talking to this about the rabbis, because whatever you talk about with the rabbis, they say there's nothing to talk about. Everything is assumed. Actually, when my parents were growing up in an Orthodox community in the United States, or my wife's parents were growing up in Israel, in Bnei Akiva, in Ezra, the idea that there was some problem if a young couple were going out together to hold hands, to hug, to kiss, nobody had any idea that there was any problem. It's only when young people started to go to yeshivot and got much more knowledge, then they began to realize that there is a problem, because according to halakha, the issues of taharat mishpacha, of family purity, are relevant if you're married and if you're not married equally. It doesn't matter, okay? If a woman who did not go to the mikveh, so if she and a man have full sexual relations, this is isur karet. But if they only hug and kiss each other, this is isur deoraita lo ta'aseh, of forbidden, because lo tikrav. Lo tikrav, you shouldn't even come near her. Okay? So, according to this position, which is unquestionably the basic halachic position that you find in all the sources, there can be no relationships with people, and you also cannot have any physical relationship if the couple is not married. However, if we think about the real life social history of marriage in the Jewish tradition, and we look at the Talmudic sources, we see that the rabbis very strongly advise that a young man or a young woman whose body has become sexually mature should get now married. Don't wait, because it's not realistic to expect that somebody that the hormones are now operating is going to refrain from contact with the opposite sex, because God created these hormones to encourage people to have contact with the opposite sex. Okay, that's what these hormones exist for, and it's unreasonable to expect that anybody will really be able to resist this. And therefore, if a young woman is now 13, she should get married. If the young man is now 14 or 15, he should get married. It says in the Shulchan Aruch that at least by 18 you should get married. And if a young man did not get married by the age of 20, we force him, the community forces him to marry. Because it cannot be that somebody will reach that age and they will be unmarried and they won't be sinning. Won't be something that they, okay. And that's clear. And, but there was actually also not a very great problem for a young woman of 13 and a young man of 15 or 16 to get married, because they didn't have to worry who they were going to marry. Baruch Hashem, man had parents, the young man. The young woman had parents. The parents knew. Now it was time. Their daughter is now 13 years old. Now is the time to find a husband. Okay? Now is the time to find a wife for our child. And they went and they spoke to the parents of the other side, and they reached some agreement. And the basic idea was that any young man could marry any young woman. It doesn't need love. It doesn't. Any young man could marry any woman. In fact, the parents would, of course, make sure that they wouldn't choose somebody who is not, for instance, from the right economic class. You wouldn't want your daughter to marry a poor man. You wouldn't want your son to marry a poor wife. And you wouldn't, usually, you would like your son to marry a rich daughter, but the father of the rich daughter wasn't interested in your poor son. Okay? So people usually married within their economic class, and they married by shidduch, and the children were not really a major function in determining who this would be done by. And Baruch Hashem, now they were married, they were living together, and now there's no problem about the hormones because they have each other. The problem is solved. In our times, of course, not only are we, don't people get interested, people don't get married at such a young age. I'm saying we, maybe there's some people that don't agree with me, but I'm saying we, many people in modern society, many Jewish people, many Orthodox Jewish people, really don't want their daughter to get married at the age 13. They think, no, she's too young, she needs an education, she needs to mature, she needs to be able to choose her path in life, and then later she will be ripe for marriage. And the same thing is true of young men. And we also frequently expect today, and we think it's good that they should have an education, they should have a profession, they should make a decision as more mature young men and women. And also, in many circles, the idea of marriage through the shidduch and the parents will choose who you marry is not one that is accepted. And in fact, many people, I'll take myself, think it's not a good idea for me to decide where my daughter will marry. Okay? She should decide. And all I have to believe is that if I gave her a good training, a good education, a good moral character and so on, she will choose somebody who is good for her. But I want her now in 10 years complaining why I chose that husband for her? No. Okay. So what we now have is many, many thousands, tens of thousands, if not more, throughout the Jewish world of young people who are basically Shomrei Mitzvot, they're Shomrei Shabbat, Shomrei Kashrut, they follow the holidays, they do many things, but here they are, 20 years old, 22 years old, 26 years old, 30 years old, and they have not yet found a person who they decide they want to completely be with that person for the rest of their life. What are they supposed to do meanwhile about having some relationships with people of the opposite sex? The mainstream position of Orthodox rabbis, they're supposed to do nothing. The less contact they have with people of the opposite sex, the better, because the contact will only cause problems. So what I was considering this issue, and I said to myself, perhaps we can find within the tradition of halakha sources which provide an alternative and provide an option for such young men and women to have a relationship with people of the opposite sex without being married. Okay, and that's what we're going to see this evening. Let's start with the Rambam, which is on row number 9. He begins telling about the laws of marriage, and he tells a certain story. Kodem matan Torah, before the giving of Torah, haya adam pogea isha bashuk. A man would meet a woman in the street. Im ratza hu vehi, if both of them agreed, noten la schara, he would pay her money, ubo'el ota, and have sex with her al ema derech, on the main street. They would go to some park, they would have sex. Beholech lo, and he would go. That was how it was before Matan Torah. V'zu hi hanikret kedesha. Such a woman is called kedesha, meaning a prostitute. Mi shenitena Torah ne'esra kedesha. Once Torah was given, Torah forbids such sexual activity. Shene'emar, where it says in Devarim, Lo tiye kedesha mibnot Yisrael. There shall not be a kedesha, a prostitute from the daughters of Israel. Lefichach. Therefore, kol habo'el isha, any man who has sexual relations with a woman, l'shem znut, for casual intercourse, below kiddushin, without having first given kiddushin to this woman, loke min haTorah, gets malchut, by the court is punishing him, mipnei sheba'al kedesha, because he had sex with a prostitute. So according to according to the classical way that most people have understood this Rambam, it's a black and white situation. Or the woman is married, or she's a prostitute. That's how it is. It's like switching a light switch on and off. And before she's not married and she has sex, she's a prostitute. And this is forbidden by the Torah. And if she's married, fine, no problem.
If he doesn't give her money.
Okay, the Rambam doesn't talk about such an issue because he says, okay, Okay, so it seems, now it's true that not everybody has read the Rambam in this way, but the Rebbe, Abraham ben David of Provence, who was a critical reader of Rambam, said, just a minute, אין קדשה, אלא מזומנת, והיא המופקרת לכל אדם. A קדשה, a prostitute, is some woman who is available at all times for sex to any man that's willing to pay her. אבל המייחדת עצמה לאיש אחד, a woman who devotes herself and is committed to only one man, אין בה לא מלכות, there's no punishment for having this relationship, ולא איסור עליו, and it's not forbidden by the Torah, והיא הפילגש הכתובה, and this type of relationship in which the woman doesn't sleep around for money with many men, but has a steady relationship only with one man, is the Pilegesch, and the Pilegesch is something that we find in the sources. In fact, if we look up at Bavli, rule number 6, my nashim umay pilagshim. What is the meaning of women, wives, and what is the meaning of Pilegesch? Amar Rav Yuda Amar Rav, nashim, wife, b'ktuba b'kiddushin. A wife is a woman who has a relationship with a man based on she has kiddushin and she gets a ketubah. What will happen if he divorces her or dies? Pilagshim. Velo ketubah uvelo kiddushin. There's no ketubah and there's no kiddushin, but this is a relationship which is regarded as a permitted relationship. If you look at the Bible, all the time people, men, good, upright, famous men from the Jewish people are said to have Pilegesch. The Rambam says Pilegesch is only for kings. But if you really look at the biblical text, you see that's not the case. One very famous example is a horrible story which reminds us of what we read today in the parasha, which is the story Pilegesch Bagiv'ah. In Pilegesch Bagiv'ah, there is a man from Har Ephraim, and he is living with a Pilegesch, and they have a fight. And she goes back to her home in Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda, and he goes to try to solve the fight and bring her back. And he comes, he stays over at her father's home where she is. The father treats him very nicely and respectfully. It's even called that he stayed with his father-in-law. And then on the way back, he and the wife went to Eva Binyamin, and they, unlike Sodom where the angels intervened and prevented this, here the people, the men of Eva Binyamin, had a gang rape of this poor woman, and she died. And this, when this became known, this caused such an outrage among the whole tribes of Israel that they all came and they attacked that city because they said this is a terrible thing to happen in the people of Israel. If the whole relationship of Pilegesch was not moral and was not permitted and was not good according to the Torah, why did everybody get such outraged? It was coming to her. His Kedeshah. So you see from that story that it was considered very normal and moral and socially acceptable to have a relationship of Pilegesch. In the 13th century in Spain, Ramban, Moshe ben Nachman, was the leading scholar of Spanish Jewry in the 13th century. He wrote many works, and also we have Tshuvot, responsa from him. And in this responsa, we have a tshuva that he wrote to his in-law, because I think his son had married Rabbi Yonah's daughter. Rabbi Yonah was also an important Spanish rabbi who went around preaching to people how they should be upright and follow the Torah and be committed to the mitzvot. And here, the Ramban is responding to a question that Rabbi Yonah asked, because Rabbi Yonah knew that in the field of halakha, Ramban was greater than him. So he is consulting about this issue, and Ramban, Moshe ben Nachman, writes in row number 20, Ish Elohim Kadosh, hu harav hachasid Rabbi Yonah. He gives very high quality Rabbi Yonah. Shlomcha v'shlom toratcha yigdal elahad v'yizgeh lanetzach. May your Torah and your well-being flourish forever. Higiani mitzvatcha, your command or request got to me, be'inyan ha-Pilegesch, about the Pilegesch, lehodi'acha ba'da'ati al derech ha'emet. You want to know what I really think on this issue? Lo kenoseh v'noten, not just give you this opinion, that opinion, this opinion. You want to know what's really the case. I don't know what question there can be. It's certainly permitted. I don't know what the question is. You can say this and this, but the bottom line is, I don't know what the question is. It's certainly permitted for a man and a woman to have a relationship of Pilegesch, כיוון שייחדה לעצמו, if she is only with him. Okay. Now, why doesn't he say about this the opposite direction? Because for men, they still had in Spain polygamy. A man could have more than one woman. A woman could not have a relationship at the same time with more than one man. So the issue is, if during this relationship the woman would be completely faithful only to this man. By the way, the same symmetry exists with a married woman. In the Bible, in Chazal, in other places that didn't accept that Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom, a married man could have simultaneously permitted relations. He could have several wives. A wife could not have several husbands. Okay, so the issue here is that the woman would be committed only to this man. He says, sleeping around is not permitted because, I won't read it, because then we don't know who is the father of whom. And it might be that the children, if a man slept around indiscriminately, he would have a child here, a child there, a child there, then they would grow up and they would meet, and it would be a brother meeting a sister, because we don't know who the husband is. In the row 24, Avan keshenichnesa bebeito, when she goes to live in his home, vehi miyuchedet v'yedu'a lo, and she is only with him, and everybody knows that. Baneha nikra'im al shemo. He is the father of her children, and that's the official recognition. They, by the way, inherit. They have, if he dies, they have to be in mourning. There's no question that he is recognized as the full halachic father of these children, although there was no kiddushin. She'arei David nasa ota. David had Pilagshim, velo uzkar bakatuv. It was never mentioned anywhere. Velo b'gemara, hefresh ben melech le'ediot. The Rambam says only kings could have Pilagshim. He said there's no support for this anywhere in the Tanakh. Umatzinu Gidolei Israel Osimuta, leaders of Israel, respected people, had such relationships, Shene'emar, that it says, Eifa Pilegesch Kalev Yalda. Gidon, the shofet, the judge, Gidon Shoftam Shel Yisrael, Shediber Bo Hashem, that received divine messages from God. It says about him, Pilegesho Asher Bishchem Yaldalo. So they had these relationships. Ve'im Domar Shashofet Areu Kemelech, according, you want to go according to the Rambam, that he's like a king. Mipnei Shenoeg Sarah, he has power. Pilegesho Yedu'ah, everybody knows who his Pilegesch is, but they won't know about the regular person. Natata Devarecha Leshigurim, you're making a differentiation which is unfair. Ve'atira Leba'alei Shem, only famous people could have such relationships. She says, we don't find this kind of differentiation in the Torah. And then he brings the case of Pilegesch Bagivah, where it's clear that this is a permitted relationship. And then he says, in line 32, Shema Tomar, maybe you might think and say, Min HaTorah imuteret, Torah permits such a relationship, umidivrehem, but it's only the rabbis who came later, they forbade it. In many cases, we know that the rabbis took things that the Torah permitted, and they forbade it. Okay, a famous thing is why we can't have chicken with milk. Chickens have no milk. And therefore, according to the Torah, we could have chicken with milk, but because the meat of a chicken is warm-blooded, so on and so forth, and it's similar to meat of four-legged animals. The rabbis said you can't have chicken. So the rabbis, in many cases, said that something that the Torah permits, we forbid. So maybe also the Torah permitted Pilegesch, but then sometime came the rabbis, and the rabbis said, no, it's forbidden. Look through the entire Talmud, you'll find no place in which the rabbis say that this relationship of Pilegesch is forbidden. Okay, and when the Ramban says look through all the Talmud, he knows what he's talking about. Okay, if there was any place in the Talmud that it would be written that it's forbidden by the rabbis, be sure the Ramban would know about this. וכי באיזה מקום מוזכרה כזרע זו בתלמוד? ואיזה בית דין נמנו עליו? Is it reported in any place in the Talmud that some beit din got together and decided, no, we can't agree to this, we have to stop. Pilegesch can't be anymore. He says, no, it never happened. ובאיזה זמן נשנית משנה זו? And at what time was it determined by any rabbi that this is forbidden? But these are rhetorical questions because the answer is there's no evidence to support the theory that at any time in the Talmudic period, rabbis made Pilegesch forbidden. He says, but just a minute, it says in various places, for instance, Kala in line 34, Kala velo beracha, asura leba'ala kenida, without an official ceremony of chuppah, and even the person, the woman, is engaged to the man, they can't have sexual relations because they didn't have the ceremony of chuppah. So here you see that you can't have sex without chuppah. And it also says in line 35 and then, anybody that wants to write the ketubah for a virgin, and he wants the ketubah to be less than the minimum 200 kesef, or he wants to give a ketubah less than 100 to a widow, if he now has sex with that woman, it's as if he's having forbidden sex. So So he says the reason is that all of these rules and regulations apply to someone who wants to have a full official marriage. Okay, and in line 37 in the middle, כל שבא לישא אישה שתהיה אסורה לכל אדם. He wants officially the woman that there should be kiddushin. The status of kiddushin, the main function is that now if another man sleeps with her, it's a death penalty. And if she sleeps with another man, it's a death penalty. The kiddushin forbids this woman to any other man. And now she belongs to him. Le'yarsha. If she dies, he will inherit her. And if she passes away, she is now considered his relation, and he has to become involved in her kvuha, in her burial. Anybody who wants that kind of relationship, Amra Torah, Yekadesh, V'yachnis lachupa, V'yivarech berikat chatanim b'asara. That kind of relationship we establish by having kiddushin, and we have a chuppah, and the chuppah and the ceremony has to be in the presence of 10 men. That's how we enter into that kind of relationship. But in line 41, he says, he wants to have a relationship with the woman, not in the framework of kiddushin, but in the framework of Pilegesch, in which if she now sleeps with another man, there's no penalty of death. Okay. This couple can now continue their relationship, but there's no penalty of death. ולא אסור על אחרים, ולא קידש כלל, הרשות בידו. Okay, so it presented here that the man has two options. One option is to follow the path of kiddushin and chuppah. That creates a certain type of very strong commitment and many isurim that are connected. But if the man wants a different type of relationship, which is less committed and less bound by various isurim, he can do it. And in that case, all of the things that were said about somebody that wants to get married and doesn't want to do this and wants to do that, it's not relevant here because they don't want marriage, they want Pilegesch. Okay. And then he goes on, he gives his own interpretation of Rambam, which is like what you were reading, that the Rambam really seems to be saying it's either Kedisha or marriage, but really the Rambam is not actually saying that, and the Rambam never denies the third option, although he never mentions it. And after telling all of this, Rabbeinu Yonah said, what's the real truth? He said, the real truth, there's no problem about Pilegesch. There's no problem. It's perfectly permitted. What does he end this tshuva? Ve'ata Rabbeinu Yonah, Hashem yechayecha, my God grant you life. Bimkomcha, where you live, tazhirein mina Pilegesch, tell them that it's forbidden. Just a minute, you wrote the whole tshuva saying it's permitted. He said, no, you tell them it's forbidden. She'im yed'u ha'heter, because if people will know that it's permitted, yiznu ve'yifritzu ve'yavo alehem v'ninutam. People thinking that this is now permitted will go beyond the bounds of what is really permitted, and they will have indiscriminate sex, and the women won't go to the mikveh, and if the women don't go to the mikveh, whether they're married or not, this is isur karet if they have sex. So he says at the end, although really it was never forbidden by any authority, not from the Torah and not from the rabbis, Tell them it's forbidden. Later on in the Rosh of Asher ben Yechir, the great main Talmud, Rabbi Meir Yehutenberg, he moved from Ashkenaz to Spain because he felt that the authorities would persecute him, and he was accepted in Spain as a great rabbi, and he lived there for several years. And he's discussing in Masechet Kippurot, where it says that in the time of Kiddushin, Mai Mevarachim, this is line 49, Asher, Baruch Ata Hashem Asher Kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al arayot, and told us that forbidden sexual relations, incest, arayot is forbidden, ve'asar lanu et ha'arusot, and forbade us to have sexual relation with women who we have kiddushin, but not yet chuppah. Vehitir lanu et hanesuot, and permitted us only to have sex with women who are married in chuppah. Vekiddushin baruch Ata Hashem mekadesh. Yesh makshim. Some people ask, lama ein mevarchim, when you get married, why don't you make a blessing about the kiddushin? Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lekadesh et ha'isha. And we don't have such a bracha. You go to any Jewish marriage, there is never a bracha. Okay, you light candles, you say la'adlik nirot. Oh, Asher kitshanu la'adlik nirot. There's no such bracha about kiddushin. Why not? If it's a mitzvah to have kiddushin, why is there not a blessing to say at that time? It seems to me, says Ki bracha zu eina bracha la'asiyat mitzvah. The mitzvah is not really kiddushin. Ki Pirya u'reviya, having, be fruitful and multiply, having children, that's the mitzvah. Okay, God said, atem puru u'revu, that's the mitzvah. And why do people get married? To be able to fulfill the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to have a family, to have children. Marriage is the way to get to that point. But he says it's not the only way. Im lakach Pilegesch, if a man will not marry a woman in official marriage, but he will have a relationship, not in chuppah and kiddushin, with a woman who she has a committed relationship only with him. V'kiyem birya uvya, and she became pregnant, and she has children. These children are now his children, and he has fulfilled the mitzvah of Konkubinat without any kiddushin, without any chuppah. You don't need that. Okay. There's no mitzvah to marry. By the way, you know that according to the rabbis, although in Sefer Bereshit, it says that God says to the man and the woman, Atem peru urevu. The rabbi said the mitzvah is only on the man. So really, there's no mitzvah in any case for the woman to get married. If anybody comes to a woman and says, how come you're a Jewish woman, you're not getting married? What's happening? She said, I don't have to get married. It's the man that has that problem.
The women have the aseh, not the shelo.
Well, we don't know who has, but in any case, I don't know if that's in the Torah. Maybe it's in Tanakh. But so the woman doesn't have this mitzvah. In any case, Okay, for this reason, לא נתקנה ברכה במצווה זו. There was never a bracha on קידושין. אף בנושא אישה לשם קריאה ראויה, even if somebody did marry and had קידושין with the intention of establishing a family, כיוון שאפשר לקיים מצוות קריאה ראויה בלא קידושין. And since there are two possibilities, they're equal. According to Halacha, you should have children. Okay. Men should have children, according to Halacha. And if the man wants to have children, for technical reasons, he needs a woman. But he doesn't need a wife. He can have a relationship, which Halacha accepts under Pilegesch, and have children with her, and the children are fully legitimate children. Well, she's not married to anyone else, right? So the children are fully legitimate children, and he doesn't need kiddushin, and they could live together as a couple without kiddushin, and there's no problem. Of course, in parentheses, she should go to the mikveh like any woman who is having sexual relations. Yes, please.
This is also clear. Why should anybody get married? It only causes problems.
Yes. That's a very interesting point. I don't know what to answer.
The answer is that women must also accept this system.
Okay. In the 16th century, there was a great diaspora of Sephardic rabbis who had been expelled from Spain, and they moved to other countries. One of the major places that they moved was the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire was very encouraging for the Jews to come, because they realized that these Jews had a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge, and they would help develop the Ottoman Empire, which had recently conquered great areas in the Balkans, and in 1453 they had even conquered Constantinople. They wanted to develop all of their kingdom, so they very much encouraged the Jews to come, and many leading Sephardic rabbis came and established great communities in this place, and one of these communities was in Salonika. And the leading rabbi of the time in Salonika was Rabbi Shmuel di Medina, who was the Rav HaKolel of all of the communities of Spanish exiles in Salonika. And he is telling a story, or is relating to a story. Ma'aseh shehaya kam haya. This is what happened. Ki behiyot Reuven po ha'ir Saloniki, when Reuven, now Reuven is a fictitious name, okay, that you give to somebody that you want not to identify who his real name is. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Leah, Rachel, Dinah. You use these names also in other legal systems. We have names for John Doe, John Smith, okay. בהיות ראובן פה העיר סלוניקי נתן עיניו באישה נכבדה. He was interested in a very honorable woman. ויאותו שניהם, and they both agreed what? To establish a relationship. עד שהיא נתייחדה אליו ימים רבים. She was only in a relationship with him for a long time. ונתעברה ממנו. She became pregnant from him. וילדה בן, and she had a child. והלך מפה ראובן הנזכר. So Reuven moved to a different town. והניח הבן ביד אומן. And he left the child under some person who was taking care of the child and teaching him. והיה משלח אל האומן שכרו מדי חודש או שנה. From time to time, he would send money from wherever he was now, Amsterdam, Jerusalem, any other, he would send money to support that child. ויגדל הילד ויהי לבן חיל. He grew up and he was a fine young man. והלך אצל אביו, and he went from Saloniki to now be with his father. וישמח האב עם בנו ונתגדל אצלו. And the father was very happy with this wonderful son that had come to him from Saloniki, and they lived together very happily. עד שנתעשר הבחור. And this young man was very talented. He became very rich. ויהי שמו הולך בכל הארץ. And he became well known throughout the world. ויהי היום, then, what happened? ראובן נתבקש בישיבה של מעלה. Meaning, he was called to the heavenly court. He passed away. וחיי לנו לכל ישראל שבת. And he left life to us and to all the rest of Israel. והניח בנים ובנות לאשתו הנשואה לו ממשפחתו. He also had a wife, an official wife with chuppah and kiddushin, and he had children from her. And he also had this fellow, this young man, from the Pilegesch. And it seems שבני ראובן, the children of the official wife, לסיבת מה, for some reason, ביקשו להגיח לבחור הנ"ל מנזקי אביהם. They're trying to prevent him from inheriting together with them in the Yerusha of their father. ומבקשים עילה לזה, they try to find some excuse, כי הבחור הנזכר אינו בן אביהם. He is not really the son of their father. כי האישה, אמו, the mother of this fellow, לא הייתה אצל אביהם בקידושין. She did not have a relationship of kiddushin with the father. And therefore what? She was a prostitute. כמו שזנתה עם אביהם, זנתה עם אחר. Just like she had in forbidden sexual relations with their father, she was sleeping around with many men. וכיוון שכן הוא, and because of this, הם יורשים ודאים. They are certainly the yorshim of their father because what? He's married to their mother. והוא, the other fellow, ספק, because who knows if his mother didn't sleep around with other men because there was no kiddushin. And now they're asking Shmuel de Modina, what is the law in such a case? Tshuva. בנדון שלנו, in the case under discussion, שהיא כשרה בת ישראל. This woman is a woman from a good family, a kosher woman, an upright woman, והוא תלמיד חכם וכשר ומיוחס, and he, the father, who now passed away, is a learned person, a kosher person of a good family, and they had a relationship between them. אינה נקראת ביד זנות. This is not considered a forbidden relationship. I'll prove further on. And therefore we consider that there's no question. There's no reason to say that she slept around with anyone else. She was in a committed relationship. It was upright. It was fine. The father was okay. She was okay. Their son is certainly the son of that father. And then he says in line 68, האישה הפנויה, the unmarried woman, שמסרה עצמה לישראל כשר, that agreed to have relations with the kosher Israelite, בין פעם אחד במקרה, if it happened once, בין שנתייחדה אליו, this was a permanent relationship, אין לה שם זונה חס וחלילה. You think any woman that has sex with a man, and they're both Jewish and they're both fine people, not criminals, not wrong. אין לה שם זונה חס וחלילה, אלא פילגש. Okay. And then he says that it's known that certain rabbis seem to have held against this possibility, Rambam and Rashi. He said, but there's many more rabbis that say that there's no problem. And he quotes several rabbis that we have, Reve, Rosh, the son of the Rosh. And then he says in the middle of line 74, Hareim came. The bottom line is, Nitbarer, it's clear that you dati, sheisha zu, shenityachadah leish Elohim zal. He was a holy man, an upright man. He had a relationship with Pilegesch. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a fine kosher relationship. Lechule alma modu, everyone will agree, delo chala le'ashem zonah. In line 77, נתברר מכל מה שאמרנו, it's clear from whatever I said, שהבחור הזה, בן הגביר, the young man who was born to his father in the Pilegesch relationship, נישא ומאוד נעלה. This is a very fine, upright person that had this relationship. בנה של אישה זאת הוא מיוחס, he's considered fully son of his father, ואין בו שום פגם, חס וחלילה, there's no problem with such a child, בדין תורתנו הקדושה, according to the law of our Torah, והרי הוא תשאר בניו בכל דבר. This person who was born from this Pilegesch relationship has equal status to the other children of this man that was born from a wife that took the Kiddushin. All of them together take part in the Yerusha, and he is a fully recognized, legitimate child. In the 18th century, there lived in Germany a very interesting person, Yaakov Emden, who was considered a very great rabbi, and also had different opinions and ideas that not everybody agreed with. But here we will see that he is on the issue of Pilegesch, continuing in the line of the rabbi that we saw until now. Somebody asked, you asked me about Pilegesch. We don't know if somebody really asked him, or he himself is posing this question so that he can give the answer. This happens in Shirot and Trufot, that you want to very much to give an answer, but nobody asked you the question. So you write, I was asked, or I realized that there's a big question, and so on, and now here's the answer. And from line 96, he develops certain things which are relevant to our discussion. His Afal Gav de Pilegesch din Tunya Yeshla, a Pilegesch who lives without Kiddushin with a man, is not considered Eshet Ish. He says, but don't think that this means that if she's not Eshet Ish, she can just sleep around. It's not a black and white. Or this, or that. Nevertheless, asura le'adam acher, she cannot have a relationship with a different man, as long as she has a relationship with Shimon, she can't sleep around with other men, because the minute she does that, she will become Kedesha. Kedesha means a woman who sleeps around indiscriminately with many men. But the Pilegesch is not allowed to do that. וגם משום הבחנה בין זרע לזרע, it's important to know who the father is. משום האחי, because of this, אפילו שלחה הראשון מביתו, okay, Shimon and Yocheved had a Pilegesch relationship during this time, they were faithful to each other. After a year, they decided, that's it, no more relationship. Does she need get? No, because there was no kiddush. Can she now tomorrow move in with a new man? She says no, because the same of a divorced woman who is officially divorced, there's 3 months that she has to wait to know if she was pregnant from the first man and then he's the father, or from the new man. So there's a period of 3 months after a woman has ended a relationship in which she cannot begin a relationship with a new man. Yes, please.
What's the middle time required to be together to be called Pilegesch? A day, a week, a year, 1 night.
He doesn't go into that. He doesn't go into that.
אפילו פעם אחת.
By the way, we have in the Gemara, rabbis are going on business trips, and they come to certain communities and they say, who wants to be with me for 1 day? Okay? So it's hard for me to believe that they were having kiddushin and then giving a get and a kibah. So apparently this is the type of relationship that they were thinking about at that time.
But Rashi אומר, מי רוצה להינשא. Rashi על התג אומר, מי רוצה להינשא.
Okay, but that's what Rashi says, but I don't, it seems difficult to me to say that. Sean? Ilkach. Oh, now, in the book, I think it's the book of Melachim. No, maybe, yeah, there's a tragic story of Amnon and Tamar. Amnon, the brother of Tamar, raped her. When she was coming, he said, I'm sick, I need somebody to give me food. She was very kind to him. She came and he raped her. And we are told that from that time, the rabbis made a gzera al yichud ha'penuya, meaning a man should not be with an unmarried woman in the same room, if it's locked or closed or so on, because they might suddenly have sex. So the yichud is an isur yichud, which is not to be in the same room with a woman who is even unmarried, because something bad might happen. And therefore, just a minute, a Pilegesch is not married. So maybe she can't be in the same room with a man. If she can't be in the same room with a man, they can certainly not develop a Pilegesch relationship and have sex together. So, Yaakov Emden says, Hilchach, therefore, ודאי לא גזרו על ייחוד הפנויה, אלא כשאינה מיוחדת לאיש. What the rabbis meant was that a man who has no established relationship with this woman shouldn't be alone with her in the same room. שלא תהיינה בנות ישראל הפקר כקדשות, וכמעשה אמנון ותמר, it's to prevent sudden, unexpected sex happening between people who have no established relationship between them. מה שאין כן, הלוקח לו פילגש, מיוחדת היא לו, they have a relationship, and therefore certainly they can be in the same room. So the Yichud can't be relating to such a situation in which people have an existing relationship. So certainly, whether they're married or they're Pilegesch, they can be in the same room. And then Rabbi Yaakov Emden says, well, if that's the case, and it's really no problem, according to Halakha, to have such relationships, why don't we see this happening all the time? Good question. But he answers, he says, מה שנמנעו במדינות הללו מפילגש, the fact that in the countries where I live, meaning in Germany, they don't have such relationships, מעצמם ומעליהם נמנעו. People didn't do that, not because any rabbi said it was asur, but what we would call a social convention. The social convention is that's not what you do. בחושבם שיש בו איסור. They thought that it's forbidden. ומנהג בטעות אינו מנהג. If people had some kind of custom that they followed, they thought, for instance, you're not allowed to eat green cheese. They never ate green cheese in their whole life. Nobody in this town ate green cheese. They thought the Torah says don't eat green cheese, but suddenly they realized what? It's a mistake. There's no such issue. So he says it's minhag b'ta'ud. Once we tell the people about this and they realize it's minhag b'ta'ud, there's no reasons for them to continue not doing Pilegesch. ובאמת, in the next line, הוא מותר, ולסייג לא קיבלוהו מעולם. They just did it מחיסרון ידיעה בלבד עשו כן. And he says, not only do we not gain anything by imagining that such a relationship is forbidden, אדרבה, ההפך הוא סייג לתורה. The thing that will really make Torah values more realistically achieved is if we encourage Pilegesch. Why? משום להרחיק מהעבירה, ההפקר והזנות. What do you think, that because we tell the men that they can't have Pilegesch, they're not having sex? They're having sex in all kind of forbidden, hefker, disgusting ways. ולמעט בזימה דנשקס, they're having sex with non-Jewish women. They're masturbating. They're doing all kind of things which is much worse than having sex in a committed relationship between a man and a woman, and it's all orderly and it's done properly. That's much better than all the things that are really happening because some people believe that it's not allowed to have Pilegesch. And he goes on about this, but he says this, and in a certain sense, before I go on to further examples here, is what is happening in real life in our time between young men and women, or young men and many women, or all different things that are happening between young men and non-Jewish women, between young women and non-Jewish men. Is that better than the option of Pilegesch? Does that more clearly support the real values of Torah by saying you can't have a good relationship with a Jewish girl unless you get married, and therefore, what's happening meanwhile in real life? Okay, so what Emden is saying, that this will be a siyag LaTorah. This will really enable people to conduct relationships in ways that are much more upright and correct according to the values of Torah than what is actually happening in real life. Okay, and, what I want now to see is that we have in the next pages several examples of rabbis in modern times, meaning 18th, 19th, 20th century, who knew about the option of Pilegesch, and they used it to solve certain real-life situations that they had before them. Okay, one is in Morocco, Mishpatim Yesharim, is Rabbi Yaakov Birdugo, one of the greatest rabbis in Morocco, And there was an interesting case there of a Jewish man was married to a Jewish woman, and that Jewish man was very close to the court of the Sultan. And at a certain time, he came under pressure to become a Muslim. And there was a lot, he couldn't resist, and he became a Muslim. He became a Muslim. He divorced his Jewish wife. But really at heart, he feels that he is Jewish. He wants to be a Jew. So now he doesn't have a wife. But if he, as a Muslim, will now go and take a new Jewish wife, the Muslim will say to him, "What's going on here? You're a Muslim. Why are you taking a Jewish wife?" However, if he will go back to his original wife and he'll tell the Muslims, "No, I'm not taking a new wife. I'm just going back to my original wife," the Muslim will say, "Okay, that we can understand." So he wants to go back to the original wife, but meanwhile that wife had kiddushin from a different man. And she was also divorced from that relationship, but according to Torah, if a woman is married to one man, divorced, married another man, divorced, she cannot go back to the first man. By the way, the opposite is true according to Islam. According to Islam, if a man divorces a woman, he cannot take her back unless in the middle she has been married to someone else. So this situation was very good from the Muslim perspective, how he could take back his original wife. But according to Torah, he couldn't do that. So, but he's the only option for a Jewish partner that he has. Otherwise, he'll have to take a Muslim wife. So, Rabbi Yaakov Berdugo says that it says that the man that was married to a woman, and he divorced her, and she married another man who divorced her, he's not allowed to marry her again. But it doesn't say that he can take her now as a Pilegesch, without kiddushin. So Rabbi Yaakov Berdugo says, okay, he goes, investigates all of the sources, and he finds that most of the rabbinic sources support that Pilegesch is a fine option. And he said to this man, you can't take back your first wife. Chas v'chalila, don't give her kiddushin. Chas v'chalila, you can live with her as Pilegesch, and the Torah doesn't forbid that. A similar case we have with Rav Zvi Zohar, you said that you saw earlier today, and he says, this is the problem. A Kohen, a Jewish Kohen, married a non-Jewish woman in civil marriage. How could he do that? Because civil marriage permits people to get married of different religions. Civil, no problem. וילדה ממנו בן בנימון ומת הבן. She became pregnant from him. They had a baby boy. He was circumcised. You see in many, many cases in the halachic literature that a Jewish man has a baby, a boy baby from a non-Jewish wife, and they circumcise the child. It was a very accepted practice.
By whom?
By many, many Jewish people throughout the world. And later, if they wanted the child to be fully Jewish, they only had to do tefillah. Because the milah had already been done. No, they didn't need a tafat tamrit because the original milah had been done by a mohel with the intention that this was a milah.
He was not Jewish.
וללמוד ומת.
He was not Jewish.
He was not Jewish.
So מילה לשמו אי אפשר if he's not Jewish.
You know, the Rambam says that she may have a brit milah for a goy who recognizes that it's a mitzvah of milah. A mohel can have a brit milah for such a goy, but not if it's only done for medicinal purposes. Then no. Okay. וללמוד ומת הבן. That child then died. ועתה, and now, הנוכרית, the non-Jewish wife, ליבה נוקפה, her heart feels terrible, שאיננה באותה דת כיוונה, that she's not in the same religion as her child. Now, he doesn't say what exactly is the psychological problem, but for instance, she thinks that the child had a brit milah, he was Jewish, he died. When she dies, she's not Jewish, will she meet her son in heaven? Maybe there's a different place for the Jews and the Christians, and she wants to be in the same religion as her dead son. ורוצה להתגייר, she wants now to convert to Judaism. ולישא את הכהן כדת משה וישראל, she wants to continue living with the Kohen after having Giyur and live with him as a Jewish man and wife, and now she'll also be in the same religion as her dead son. That's her mindset. ויש לחשוש, there's a problem. שאם לא יובל בית דין לגייר את הנוכרית, if we will refuse her to become Jewish, שתחלה ותשתגע. She will lose her mind and she will become crazy, and who will be blamed? The Jews. A woman wants to be Jewish. She feels she has to do it in order to be together with her dead son. The cruel rabbis are preventing this. There's newspapers. Everybody will know about this terrible behavior of the Jews. איך יעשו? He says, look, the truth is, what's worse? For a Kohen, in parentheses, you should know that according to standard halakha, a Kohen is a list of women that he may not marry. One of them a divorcee, that's Isul Deoraita, and also Yored. Okay, according to standard halakha, Kohen may not marry a Yored. So this woman wants to become Jewish and she wants to marry the Kohen. So, but they can't do that because he's a Kohen and she will be now a Yored. So he says, look, what should we do? Is it better, according to halakha, for a Kohen to be together with a Goya or to be together with a Yored? Both of them are not so great, according to halakha. He said, it's clear to me that for a Kohen to be together with a non-Jewish woman is worse than he should be together with a Yored. Okay. So he says, we should accept her for you. Omnam, he says on line 183, אף שמקבלים אותה לגיורת, although we accept her as a גיורת, אין לסדר לה קידושין עם הכהן. We shouldn't allow them to marry with kiddushin because all of the things that are forbidden to Kohen, isha lo gusha lo yikach. You shouldn't take, and the technical meaning in halakha yikach is kiddushin. Ki yikach ish isha kiddushin. Okay, but so the Kohen, if he has kiddushin with the Yored, he is going against the Isur. But if he doesn't have kiddushin, it's okay. אין לסדר לקידושין עם הכהן, ויותר יש איסור עם נושא גיורת שהיא כזונה על ידי קידושין ולא על ידי קידושין. ואם כן, טוב שתהיה אצל בעלה וציווי להם מי שתתקדש. So they're civilly married. They were civilly married before according to civil law. She will become a Kioret. They will continue living together, both of them now Jewish, without Kiddushin. That's much better. And then he says, you might think that there's a problem here. He says, no. People that know realize that there's not a problem. 185, you might think that such a woman who is not officially married is like a Kedesha, it's forbidden. Ayin, Sheilat Yafet, Chelek Bet, Siman Tetvav, Maram Padua, which is not the model we saw, Siman, both of whom talk about the possibility and legitimacy of a Pilegesch relationship. So he says it's better the Kohen should live with this woman under the Pilegesch relationship. The status in the eyes of the non-Jewish authorities is under civil marriage, but it will be better according to Halakha that they shouldn't have Kiddushin, they should live together with Pilegesch, and Pilegesch is permitted. And finally, we have here, I won't go into this, the case of Rabbi Eliyahu Hazan, who was the chief rabbi of Alexandria. And he was faced with the situation that there were Jewish men and Jewish women living together in Alexandria, but they were married under the European civil law. And in many countries at that time, in European countries at that time, civil law did not permit divorce. Italy didn't permit divorce. There was a long time that France didn't permit divorce, and other places didn't permit divorce. This was all because of the memory of the influence of the Catholic Church, but the civil law did not permit divorce, and now these men and their Jewish wives wanted to terminate the relationship, which they could do according to Halakha, but once they did that, they were still officially married according to civil law because there was no civil divorce. So what should now these couples do? They could have a get, but they couldn't remarry because of the civil law. So he says, you know what they should do? They should have a Pilegesch relationship with new people because they divorced each other because they don't like each other, but they could now have a Pilegesch relationship. And he said, and when they have this relationship, it's good that they should have some written document. What are the agreements between them? What he has to do to support her? What will happen if they're children? And so on. And this is to safeguard the interests of both parties, especially the woman. But the option of Pilegesch is going to solve this issue that there's no way of remarriage under civil law for these people. So, what do we see until now? And we're trying to close, and if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to take questions. That according to many leading rabbis, and according to real-life cases that occurred during the history of Halakha, we find that many leading rabbis said that a Pilegesch relationship in which there is a couple, the couple have a relationship in which they are faithful to each other during the relationship. In a certain sense, it's important to realize the morality of such a relationship is not different, to my mind, from the morality of marriage. You have a relationship of one man and one woman, you're together, you have certain moral commitments to each other, which are also married people can mistreat each other, can cheat on each other, can do this and that, but the moral component of Pilegesch is identical, or should be identical to the moral component of marriage. What's different is that there's no kiddushin. You don't need get to terminate the relationship, and therefore the termination, the ending of this relationship is equally possible for the woman as it is for the man. There is not any asymmetric. The woman can't be an aguna under this relationship. So in this article I wrote at the end, knowing all that we now know, would it not be better for us to advise young Jewish men and women who are not now going to get married at the age of 16 about the option of this upright, proper, and possible option within halakha, which is under the circumstances a viable option. Now, as I told some people today, over lunch, after I wrote this article, my aunt, my mother's sister, died. She was about 80 years old. Her husband was 82. After some time, the husband comes to me, my uncle, at a family gathering. He takes me aside. He says, "You know, Zvi, you wrote this. You thought you were writing it only for the young people. But it's very good for such a person as me. I'm a widower. I like very much to have companionship with a woman, but I'm not now going to go and have kuppah and kiddushin. It makes problems of the Yerusha, it makes problems of this and this. That's not realistic for me. But this option of living together under halakha, we're only going to be with each other, not anybody else. This is a great option for me." And I truly hadn't thought about that. But that's another. And there are other people that we know. For instance, somebody had an unhappy marriage. They were divorced. The marriage was so bad that they say to themselves, "I never want again to get married." But maybe they want companionship. Maybe they want friendship. Maybe they want relationship with a woman or a man. And they don't want to get married. They had a terrible experience with marriage. So here is a possibility for them. And it might be that after some time they will decide to marry each other. But that's not necessary for this relationship to be an option. Yes, please. I see there's a question.
You brought a few of authorities of poskim who said that it's okay to have a Pilegesch. Are there poskim who say it's not okay?
Yes,
And
Rambam says it's not
what
okay.
do contemporary poskim say?
Rambam says it's not okay. Most people, Rambam explains it differently. Most people think that Rambam says it's not okay.
Are there no others? Or is what you brought is the only
There
the
are
only people speaking
some
about?
others who apparently said that, but apparently the many, if not perhaps even most poskim who deal with this, saying it's okay. Now,
What about contemporary?
now you could say, just a minute, this person says it's okay, this person says it's not okay. Why should we follow the person that says it's okay? My answer is, the persons that say it's not okay, what option do they have for all these young men and women? What option do they have for my uncle at age 82? What option? If they could offer a good option, let's hear it. If not, and these opinions are suggested by leading rabbis, and we have the context of this, okay, I'll remind you that it says in Masechet Eiduyot in the Mishnah, okay, it says, if there was a debate in the Sanhedrin, and they had a vote, and a certain minority opinion was rejected, nevertheless, we mention it, Mishnah, the minority opinion. Why do we mention the minority opinion? It was rejected. And they say because it might be in the future that some future baby would, under their circumstances and their time and their reality, think that now the minority opinion should be applied. So that's why we're told about this, so that in the proper time and place, we can use that option. Yes, please.
Kiddushin is a public act. Everyone knows about it. Pilegesch is not a public act. So it certainly can be secret between a man and a woman.
Yes.
So what happens if they have a child and they don't know about it, that they marry a child of another child is the official one? If it's not public.
Okay. The people that support the idea of Pilegesch, okay, many of the people like Ramban said, don't tell them that because then they won't go to the mikveh. Okay? And so the people that support the idea of Pilegesch say, why is this a secret relationship? Of course, people are ashamed about it. But why should they be ashamed if it's permitted? In fact, in real life today, we know many couples are living together without Kiddushin. It's not a secret at all. Everybody knows. Moshe is living with Sarah. And it's not a secret. Everybody knows it. It's clear. Their boyfriend and girlfriend, they don't mean they're going to the movies together. They mean that they're having a sexual relationship with each other, and they're not sleeping around. And also in the non-Jewish public, everybody knows what's the difference between sleeping around and a couple that are having a permanent, open relationship, and the woman should go to the mikvah, and everybody should know about it. And once we have that, we also know who is the father and the mother. Yes, please.
Another question: could up to now be a Pilegesch after 3 months?
No. As long as she is keeping, she is the patient ish of a man. She can't have a relationship with anybody else except if she gets divorced or she kills the man. But if you think about it, and if Aduna is really a real life problem, and it's not only something that we're told about in the internet, but it's really a problem. And Pilegesch, meaning people living together without Kiddushin, is permitted according to Torah. Maybe we should in general advocate this because we can never have a guna under this framework. And I'm not talking about that right now, but it's food for thought.
What about the problem of young women who are not married, want to go to the mikveh in Israel, and they are not accepted?
Okay, in Israel, okay, some people believe that somewhere, at some time, some rabbis said that the non-married woman can't go to the mikveh. This is unknown that in any real text it occurs. The only text that I know that comes near to that, Levash of Yitzhak Bar Sheshet, who lived in Spain and in Africa around the year 1200 and something, was asked by a certain man, he said, is it true that the issue of the Tana and Shvacha applies equally to unmarried women and to married women? And Riva says, certainly. He said, I never realized that. I thought it's only a married woman that has to go to the mikveh. If that's the case, that it's also a problem with an unmarried woman, why don't we make a rule that all unmarried women have to go every month to the mikveh? Because all our men are going out with them and kissing them and hugging them, and it's all issue. To prevent that issue, we should instruct all the unmarried women to go every month to the mikveh. It's like Michshol b'fnei iver. So the Rivash writes a tshuva why we don't force all unmarried women to go to the mikveh. And he says, really, if we would force all the unmarried to go to the mikveh, it would mean that we are somehow actively encouraging them to have relationships with men. Okay, but he doesn't say that they don't have the choice to go to the mikveh if they want. Okay, so it's not the case as far as I have ever been able, nobody has been ever able to show me that there is any issue that anybody ever made against unmarried women going to the mikveh. Yes, please.
What happens? The child of a married woman who has this child from a forbidden relationship, so she's cheating, yes. So the child will be a monster.
Yes.
What happens if a Pilegesch is cheating on her husband? Will thereby the problem of a mamzer solve? Or is what is the status of
Okay,
this
first
child?
of all, it wouldn't be a mamzer because there was no kiddushin, she's not ish at ish. Only there was no kiddushin, there's no mamzerut. Nevertheless, according to what they said here, once she cheats, that's the end of the Pilegesch relationship.
Okay, but I speak about the issues mamzer now for me. Mamzer is not, the
It's
child
not
is not
mamzer. Mamzer is only if there was kiddushin. Yes, please.
First of all, to go back, there is no interdiction indeed, but if you find a mikveh in Israel where a young girl will be accepted, you should tell us where.
This is because
Because
of
today-
the foolish
Yeah.
idea of the rabbis that if they forbid the woman to go to the mikveh, they want to have sex.
Yeah.
They'll have sex with Isur Karet.
Yeah.
So what did the rabbis benefit?
Well, practically my question is about the tshuva of the Rabbi David Hoffman. The case considered of a Kohen and a Gioret is an Isur de Rabbanan, Zera and Ben Shalosh Shanim. But what about all the relationship between a Kohen and a Gioret and all the
Kohen and Gerusha.
Gerusha?
Okay,
Is
before
the
I could do the
solution
same.
of the solution of the David Hoffman is still valid, I suppose.
Before the
Isha
solution
Zona
would be the same.
Gerusha lo Yikam.
No, Yikam means kibbutz.
Okay.
But if he would have Pilegesch,
Donc apparently it's a solution for all these cases.
So is this issue of Pilegesch, which I think is very attractive, is that now Jewish society discussed in Israel or not? This whole issue of Pilegesch, which you more or less demonstrate as a very good solution. So sociologically, what is it nowadays discussed in Jewish society, in the Israeli society of nowadays world? What is the status? I mean, that's
first of all,
relevant.
if there had not been quite a few people doing this, the Rabbanut would never have made this issue. Okay, the Rabbanut is making this issue because apparently quite a few young people are doing that. Moreover, okay, when I first wrote this article, now you know there's all places on the internet where they have Shelot and Shuvot. Okay, so there was a certain rabbi who was chief rabbi of Ramat Gan, and he answers things on the internet. And apparently he wanted somebody to ask him about this so that he could say no. And so the person asked him, tell me, I heard it's very terrible to have a Pilegesch relationship. What's terrible about it? So he told him what's terrible about it. Okay. So then, about a year later, a friend of mine says, go and see what that rabbi is writing about this issue. I said, no, I already saw it. He said, no, there's a new tshuva. So I went and I looked, and here it's a real life question. It's a question from a young woman. She says, I have a boyfriend. The boyfriend is serving in the army. We are going out together seriously, and we intend to get married, but only after he finishes the army it will be an option for us. In the meantime, we're having sex together. Would it be a good idea for me to start going to the mikveh already at this time, or not? This rabbi says, I'm very sorry to hear about this. This is not the kind of thing that should be happening, but since this is the case, and since you are in this relationship and so on, it's really much better you should go to the mikveh and observe the rules of Taharat HaMishpacha and get married as soon as possible. The same rabbi. Yes, please.
המונח ידועה בציבור, זה בעצם אותו דבר כמו פילגש?
Well, okay, there is in Israeli law a term for a woman who is known to be living with a man. The term is called Yidu'a B'Tzibur. It's public knowledge that they're living together.
Konkubinat in Schweiz.
It's not identical with Pilegesch because under Israeli law the same is true if that woman is married to a different man, left that man without a gift, took up a relationship with the new man and they're living together, she's also Yidu'a B'Tzibur. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether they are doing anything according to halakha or not. So Yidu'a B'Tzibur is any case in which a woman and a man are living together without marriage in a permanent relationship. And therefore it could be that this woman has married to somebody, it could be that they have civil marriage to other partners and they're living together, so it's not exactly the same. Thank you very much.